Hey, Dave Melenda here, Positive Polarity Podcast. Hope things are going awesome for you this week. As you know, I do my best to scour the world, and I had a fun place to land right around San Diego, so near and dear to my heart. And that was the cool part. But then I learned that this guy not only built stuff himself, but now he's teaching others how to do it. And there's plenty of people in our space that have never really built a business. And that's what I love about his story and my stories. We actually built businesses and then to teach people how to do that. So we're going to jump into some fun stuff. Yigal Adato, how are you today, sir?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me on the show.
Absolutely. A leadership coach. And, you know, I Google leadership and I come up with about 33 billion things. So, for somebody listening right out of the chute, how in the world do you define leadership from your end?
So for me, it's there's so many definitions, but for me, it's actually one being integrity with yourself
Okay.
and being aligned with yourself, and then two being in integrity with others and aligned in what you say with others. So if you're going to lead, first you've got to lead yourself. We call that internal leadership,
Okay.
and then second, external. How do you lead on the outside as well? So that's
Oh,
my definition. It's like, how do you keep the promise? Do you wake up and say you're going to go to the gym and then just not? Do you shove, a bunch of candies in your mouth? Are you having fights with your wife and then you go out into the real world, talking the talk but not walking the walk?
sure. Yeah. Wow, that's tough. Well, and so we're jumping in right away and we're like, oh my gosh, okay, aligning with yourself. A lot of entrepreneurs, as you know, we don't spend time really inward. We're always
Yeah.
outward, right? We're trying to improve our team. We're trying to build the customer experience. We're trying to build a better company. And so a lot of people really struggle with starting with yourself. So if somebody's right now listening on this, Yigal, and they are struggling with that, how do you kind of encourage them to, start with themselves rather than jump in and go fix somebody else?
It's a saying I created about 7 years ago, and that's leading with baggage is misleading.
Oh, okay.
And what I mean by that is if you walk into a room where you're going to, lead a team and you have immense baggage, you're fighting with a spouse, you have got some trauma, you're dealing with some stuff, and you actually think that you can lead that way, you are very misled and you are misleading those who you need to lead. And so when I went through this situation where my wife basically told me that, we had a nice car, nice house, business was doing well. And 7 months into the marriage, she basically said, I didn't get married to be alone. Like, you go figure this out. And so I had to recalibrate. I had to look at myself in the mirror and be like, what's not working? Where am I lying? I went to therapy. I took personal development courses
Yeah.
because I knew that if I wanted to lead a team, I couldn't have walk into the room with all these masks on my face, essentially.
Wow, that's great. And I tell you what, it's funny how most of us think nobody sees it, but the reality is they kind of do, I think mask is a great word because you walk in thinking, okay, especially if like you're with your wife and you just had a nice little disagreement on the way there at a networking event or whatever, and you're trying so hard to be something you're not. I mean, it's hard, and especially running a company. I was raised, my dad said, don't ever let them see you sweat, and it's
Mhm.
like, man, you have this going in your brain, and now the words are vulnerability or transparency, empathy. These are the kind of the new words that you hear a lot more in leadership. Are you noticing people struggling to make that transition from don't let them see a sweat to let them see a sweat, I guess? Is that hard for some people?
Absolutely. I mean, in coaching business owners, one, I think that we've all been taught to one, don't show your financials to your team, keep
Right.
everything in, don't, show them that you're sweating. And I'm not asking you to just be vulnerable and transparent with your team. First step is be vulnerable and transparent with you. Like, where
Yeah.
are you lying to yourself?
Yeah.
Right? Is the relationship working? Is your health not okay? Is the money that you're bringing in not what you want? Is your conviction not up to par with what you're envisioning? So, before you take the step of being transparent, open with your team, first do it with yourself because we lie to ourselves all the time, all the time.
Yeah.
And we got to stop that in order to be able to move forward.
Yeah. I was with a guy once and we were in they took a group picture of us and he looks at his picture and he says, I look a lot better in my head. And I think we probably do that. And I think that's really why, guys like you, leadership coaches, are so valuable, because we don't know what we don't know. And my next book I'm working on is on business blind spots. And it's
Yes.
crazy how many blind spots we have, and we never do anything about them because we don't know we have them. And so I'm assuming that's part of your day-to-day life, is coming alongside, these people and helping them with their blind spots. Is that kind of one of the things a leadership coach does?
Yeah. One of the things is that we don't have people in our lives that call us out
Yeah.
on the blind spots,
Yep.
right? I'll never forget. I was at a dinner with some friends, and one of the friends just kept on talking like, "Oh, my wife is this, and she gives me such a hard time, and oh my God, I can't take it." I turned, I'm like, you know what, man? I'm kind of sick and tired of you talking so much smack about your wife. Where are you being inconsiderate? Where are you not putting in your part?
Yeah.
And there was like shock. Like he was expecting me to be, what somebody who I know calls it the brotherhood of the miserable. Like
Yeah.
he was expecting me to be like, oh, I know, man. Yeah, my wife sucks also. And yeah, you know how women are, and
Yeah.
you got this. It's fine.
Yeah.
When I did the opposite of that, there was like shock and awe. So leadership coaches like myself, I like to give people a good swift kick in the butt,
Yeah.
and not let them BS themselves. Right. I'll give you a great example. I had a company come in today, and they were writing their mission statement, and they wrote that they were ecological. They were, trying to save the earth. I was like, wait a second. Like I went there to your restaurant and you served me, 15 napkins and paper plates and wouldn't like, I'm like, that's exactly what you don't do. And they're like, well, yeah, you're right. So
Yeah.
we gotta stop pretending like everything's okay.
Yeah.
And in a leadership coach, a lot of leadership coaches teach the external stuff, Dave, how
Mhm.
to hire, fire, team meetings, those type of stuff. I more work on what's called the Unlock the Leader framework, which is how do I unlock your leadership so then you can actually go and lead.
Yeah. Wow, that's so cool. And I think that I loved what you said, and I wrote it down. It says, you can be the best marketer or strategist, but if your leadership breaks down, your business, all of it breaks down.
Yeah.
And I thought, how cool is that? That, we don't usually think of that. And it's so easy to blame other people, right? I mean, we're in a society where it's never my fault, it's everybody else's fault.
Yeah.
Whether it's on the whether it's on the football field on Sundays, it's, my gosh, I didn't do it, wasn't me, right? Whether it's there or in politics or in business. I mean, it's sad when we as leaders can't start with us, look internally and find out exactly, what we contribute to this before we start looking outward. So
Yeah.
I appreciate you sharing that. That's awesome.
And
Uh,
what I wrote there, if you don't mind me jumping, if what I
yeah, for
wrote there
sure.
is after so many years of doing business coaching, what I realized is that I was teaching all the foundational skills, leadership, marketing, strategy, customer service, metrics, all that type of stuff. And then people just weren't implementing. I'm like, what is going on? Like, why aren't these business owners implementing what I need them to implement? And
Yeah.
then we started doing leadership. And I was like, oh,
Right.
got it.
Yeah.
And so we started doing the Unlock the Leader framework and started working on clarity and courage and your commitment, the condition of your mind and your body, your connections. And then that's when people started taking action.
That's so cool. So how in the world, did you get involved in this at age 15? I mean, most 15-year-olds are not leadership focused. How in the world did that get you started so early?
So I was blessed that my parents put me into a youth group, like a youth leadership organization since I was 4 years old.
Wow.
And it was every Saturday we got together with 200 kids and we played games and we learned. And at some point at the age of 15, they teach a leadership course because at 16, you become a counselor for a group of kids.
Okay.
So at 15, I was already learning leadership. 16 came around, became a counselor. 18 came around, did more training. 21 came around, I started to learn how to become a leadership development director. 25, like, so it was just kind of like I was
Wow.
always involved in leadership without knowing it.
Okay.
Um, and then I opened up my own business, and it was really funny because Dave, I forgot a lot of my leadership stuff as I opened my business.
Okay.
About 4 years into the business, I told my brother, who was my partner, I said, "Hey,
Yeah.
man, do you mind if I bring back some of like these leadership skills that I learned when I was younger? Let me just see what happens."
Yeah,
He's
sure.
like, "Listen, man, do whatever you want. Just don't mess up with my sales." you know, as long as it makes us more money, you can do
Yep.
it. So I started
Awesome.
implementing with the management team and the supervisors, and we went from 1 million a year to 5 million a year.
Wow.
And I was like, okay, this works. Let's rock and roll.
And your brother was happy because sales increased, right? So he
Yeah.
like, hey, you know what? For us sales guys at heart, we don't want leaders to mess with our stuff.
Yeah.
Just leave us alone.
Like,
Let
get
us
out of
go.
the way.
That's so cool. And I think it's interesting because at 15, like I said, most people aren't really thinking that way. So, totally off the cuff, I mean, do you think that leaders are born or do you think they're made or is it a combination of both? Where do you kind of stand on that?
I think they're unlocked. And let me kind of give you the scenario.
Yeah.
We go through life with things happening to us. Everyone's had a trauma. Everyone's been some type of ordeal. Nobody has a perfect life, and we're put chains around us. And then something else happens, and then we're put into a box. And then something else happens, and we're thrown into the ocean. Right. So as we go along, our leadership is locked up. What does that mean? Are other people more um, charismatic? Yes. People are born with some more charisma.
Sure.
I totally believe that. But I believe that leaders can be unlocked and
Okay.
essentially made or recreated, right? So it's not
Right.
like we're making them from scratch. We're unlocking where they came from before to be a great leader using the history that they had and just stripping away all the bad stuff, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And so it is. So I'm hearing you say it's kind of inside you to start with,
Yeah.
and then we're unlocking it. We're maturing it. We're
Yeah.
shaving it here and shaving it there.
Yeah. Uh,
Oh,
and let me, if you don't mind, I'll dive a little bit deeper, right? The first three things I talk about in my program are clarity, courage, and commitment.
okay.
Everybody listening here knows what more clarity looks like, right? Or like they know what clarity is.
Hmm.
They know what courage is, and they know what commitment is. So you know what these things are, and it's not like you don't have them within you. I just unlock them and take them to a different level.
Gotcha. Hmm, that's cool. And so clarity, courage, and commitment. And I think, probably it's pretty, you know what? I'm going to say it this way. Clarity, most of us probably aren't as clear as we need to be. So we have some clarity. So we maybe see at 20, 100, 20, 80, where, we can see big problems coming ahead. But you know what? You really have to dial in that clarity if you want to see what's really coming. So I can see where that definitely needs some help from an outside source, an outside influence like you. I mean, courage, it's like, man, I feel like you either have it or you don't. And you kind of don't know you have it till you need it, right? I mean, it's real easy for us sitting here right now on a podcast to go, yeah, I got courage, right? Well, there's no lions around, there's no robbers in the house, right? So it's like, man, but I tell you what, how do you teach somebody courage? I guess that's a really hard question that
Yeah.
that I struggle with, and I'm just curious what your thoughts are.
So I think that if you take it in context of the big picture of like I want you to be courageous, we're not talking about like go to war or wrestle a lion.
Yeah,
What I talk about is like what's a courageous conversation that you need to have to move the needle? Do you
gotcha.
have to get rid of a team member? Do you have
Okay.
to talk to a spouse? Do you have to set boundaries with a family member? What's
Fair.
one conversation that you need to have to put one step ahead of each other when it comes to being more courageous? I'm not asking you to become like Leonidas and pull out the sword and
Yeah,
go to war like in 300,
yeah,
but it's like one conversation. What can we do? What's one action? I'll give you an example. Clarity. A lot of people know where they want to be. Let's take the weight scenario. When my wife said that I didn't get married to be alone, I was 40 pounds overweight.
okay.
So I was like, okay, I'm 40 pounds overweight. That's where I am. Where do I want to be? I want to be fit.
Yep.
What do I need to do? I need to shut my mouth and stop eating garbage. One courageous action.
Yeah.
And it's a courageous action because I've been doing it for so long
Sure.
that changing the habit in itself is courageous.
Yep. Wow.
So we can do this in our business, in our relationships, with our health. So again, you're not going to war. It's like, what's one courageous action that you can take to get what you want?
And I think that's the trap that most people fall into, is what I just fell into. I think of them as these big, huge rocks, right?
Yeah,
Rather than these little things, like you said, have a difficult conversation with somebody. Oh my gosh, that's no, no, I want to see this big, huge rock in front of me and scale that. That's way easier than having a difficult conversation with somebody.
yeah,
And so that's really cool. And as you get more clear, I'm guessing the clearer that you are, the easier it is to have that courage,
for sure,
because
for sure.
you ended up, you saw what you needed to do, and now it's like, huh, you know what? I got this, right? And it's hard to fight an enemy, I'm going to say, that's not clear. If it's out there ambiguous, it's really hard to fight that enemy. So I love that clarity and courage. And then does commitment kind of just show up, or is that something that if you have the clarity and you have the courage, you still probably struggle at times falling off the wagon? I mean, you didn't go from 40 pounds to zero just like, oh my gosh, that was easy.
Yeah.
Maybe you
So
did, I don't know,
no,
but
no, no. It took some work for sure, because I had the habit of not, eating healthy and not exercising.
sure.
But somebody once told me, they said, lack of clarity causes confusion, and confusion causes inaction. And commitment isn't doing things perfectly. It's just making the commitment to show up every day and do what you said you were going to do.
Wow. Okay.
So, right, I'll give you a great example. Let's say it's January 1st and everybody makes their New Year resolutions, right? And like,
Yep.
okay, this year I'm gonna um, go on more vacations. Let's say, or I'm gonna build my business to $1 million. Great. What's the one step I need to do? I need to lead generate. Awesome. So you wake up the next day and you don't do anything, and your subconscious is like, oh, did nothing.
Yep.
Next day you wake up and you're like, oh, did nothing. And so your subconscious is tacking on like these no action commitments.
Sure.
And so
Yep.
you're like, okay, man, we're going to start the Positive Polarity magazine, and we're going to open offices everywhere, and we're going to make this thing big.
Yep.
So what does your mind do? It says, wait a second, Dave, hold on. Let's go back into the vault and let's look at how committed you've been.
Yep.
Here's 56 times that you said that you were going to do it and didn't do it.
Yep.
Why don't we get some Snickers or some ice cream, watch some Netflix in the office, and we'll be perfectly fine.
Yep. And think about it a little bit, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And think about like opening 20 offices instead of 2. And so that, that's exactly what happens. So commitment is just showing up and doing what you said you were going to do. Wrong, right. You're going to mess it up. You're going to screw it up. A quarterback shows up to the game and he wins some, loses some, throws some fumbles, throws some interceptions, and throws some passes that stick, but he shows up to the game.
Wow. Yeah. And that's where I think we as entrepreneurs, we show up, but boy, I tell you what, we probably throw a lot of incomplete passes. And then isn't it easy though, as a quarterback, to kind of blame the receiver rather than take the responsibility that I didn't throw it where I was supposed to? I mean, there's times it hits their hands and it's like, wow, really? But you could get down on that person real easy, but they still have their commitment. So I think that's what's cool, is they have a commitment just like you do. So I try and help people understand, and I'm sure you do as well, that hey, let's be empathetic here a little bit. We give a get out of jail free card, for crying out loud. And I think that's where, what are some of the leadership myths that you have seen? Things that people have, false ideas about leadership. What are some of those that you run into pretty
Yeah.
regularly?
One is that you feel that people heard you as the leader. Most of the time, people aren't listening. You've got to remember that they have stresses and their mom is sick and they got the bills going on and their kid got hand, foot, and mouth disease at school. And then you're saying a list of stuff and you're expecting them to listen, as opposed to really sitting down with them and asking, hey, what did you hear? So a lot of times we have a miscommunication that makes us angry as leaders, right?
Yeah.
Two, I think that what we spoke about before, leadership starts with you. I like Simon Sinek. He wrote the book, Leaders Eat Last. For me, I don't believe it. It's leaders eat first. You've got to eat first. You've got to drink first. You've got to work out first, so you can show up ready to lead the team.
Sure.
And if you don't, you show up in a condition that's not congruent to what you need the team to do.
Yeah.
My other belief is that, so there's I'll talk about this real quick.
Yeah.
There's three types of leadership that we talk about in the program.
Okay.
One is seagull leadership. Okay. Seagull leadership, if you think about a seagull, you're sitting on the beach, you've got your sandwich and your fries. What does a seagull do? It comes in, squawks everywhere, flaps his wings, steals your food, takes a crap, and then leaves. Right?
Yep.
Some leaders do that. They come in, micromanage, squawk everywhere, take a crap all over everybody, and then take off. Right? Then you
Sure.
have your marshmallow leaders. Your marshmallow leaders are nice and gooey and chewy and soft and kind. But what happens when you put a marshmallow close to the fire?
Yep. Burns.
Burns up, chars super quick,
Yeah.
right? And so what we talk about is profit producing leadership, where you should be leading a team, a business, if you're a manager, so whatever that is, and still making profit in the business, in your life, in all areas that you want to succeed in. So the biggest misconception is like, oh, people talk about things like servant leadership, right?
Yep.
I'm in business, man. I want to make money. Empathetic leadership. I'm in business. I want to make money.
Sure.
So we tend to push away the goal of the entrepreneur, which is to make money. And we learn all these tactics of like servant leadership and emotional leadership, but we don't talk about things like let's make money and lead at the same time.
Yeah. Wow. Well, why it's so weird how making money has turned into like a negative.
Yeah.
And I mean, corporate earnings it's like, it's funny because we all need money to survive, but yet making it doesn't seem weird for an employee. And maybe I'd like to get your feedback on this, because someone on my team wants to make a bunch of money. That's like, okay, right?
Yeah.
That's like somebody just having a desire to move up the ladder. But when a business owner wants to make a bunch of money, then all of a sudden we seem to have like a little different flavor in our mouth. So I don't know if you run into that, but I just feel like there's a kind of almost like a double standard there.
Yep. I had a conversation with a team member the other day, and we were talking about like their owner's leadership. And I asked one question. I said, hey, are they trying? Are they truly putting their best foot forward? And they're like, yes. I'm like, so give them a break, man. Just
Yeah.
got through a pandemic, going to a recession. Business owners have had it really, really tough. Are they treating you horribly and miserably? No. I said, give them a break. So I think what happens is, yes, there are some bad apples in the entrepreneur space who
Yep.
only want to make money for themselves, don't care about the team, don't care about their clients, and they've given a bad name for everybody else. An
Right.
entrepreneur is there to make money and to serve a mission. And if they can do that while serving their team and their clients at the same time, it's awesome.
Yeah.
We are one of the greatest epidemics in the world, which is people just want to become Instagram influencers and don't want to work.
Yeah. Right.
Right? You're complaining about your boss that you're not showing up to work right. You don't smile, you don't finish your tasks. So it's a two-way street. And I think what makes me angry is all this blame on the business owner and the entrepreneur. Everything is like, it's like the scapegoat. It's, all the business owners fall, all the entrepreneurs. No. How are you showing up to work?
Yeah. Absolutely.
And that's what angers me even more about this whole concept.
Yeah, no kidding. And it's interesting. I'm a black and white thinker. For whatever reason, I had these two thoughts. It's hard for me to think gray. So it's like, yeah, making money is over here. And then the opposite of whatever that is, caring about your people, is over here. And I like what you were saying is, why can't you do both? I mean,
Yeah.
you can care about your people and make money. And so whether there's someone listening today that is struggling with that, we're giving you permission right here, right now, to make money and treat your team, respectfully. I mean,
Yeah.
I think that there's a middle ground. That's where I'd love to see all business owners right in that middle spot. But
Yeah.
for some odd reason, like I said, I don't know if it's just me being black or white. I just tend to be on one side or the other. And I'm just curious what your thoughts are.
So growing up, I watched a show called DuckTales, right? And DuckTales had Scrooge McDuck, who would had a vault full of coins and money and would jump in. And I think that a lot of people see successful entrepreneurs that way, that we just hoard the money. But I
Sure.
believe there's a vortex of money. And a successful entrepreneur sticks their hand in, knows when to grab the money. And then when they spend money, they throw money back into the vortex.
Yeah.
So a great profit producing leader creates profit, makes money, and then also gives back, right? Is giving back to the economy, is donating money to their churches and synagogues and nonprofits, and they're making a change in their community. That's what profit producing leadership is all about.
Right.
We're producing profit, not just for ourselves, but for everybody who comes in contact with us. So I think we grew up with this misconception of like Scrooge McDuck. Um, are there some Scrooge McDucks out there? Absolutely. But then there's also some incredibly good people. There's bad doctors, bad lawyers, bad
Yep.
coaches, bad consultants, bad everything out there. And we
Yep.
can't judge the world based on those bad apples.
Yeah, that's so true. Well, hey, as we start to come in for a landing today, I wanted to ask you something because you built multi-million dollar businesses, and you started pretty young, which is pretty cool. Have you seen something consistent through that? Where you tend to see the same thing from a leadership perspective, or you're able to use the same principles throughout, regardless of your business. Is there anything that's kind of shown up every time you were building one of these businesses?
I go back to the first three C's: clarity, courage, and commitment.
Okay.
When your team knows where you're going, clarity. When you're making decisions that need to be made and choices, courage. And when you're committed to the process, your team will take a bullet for you, and
Yeah.
they will be on board because they're not on a team with a leader who sways and flops like a fish out of water. They're not on a team with a leader who is not sharing what's happening and what the mission, the vision, the values are. And they're not on a team with a leader who isn't committed to them and the business growing. So
Yeah.
all of what I've seen is that clarity, courage, commitment in all these successful businesses.
Wow. And now that's pretty cool that you've expanded that out to the team.
Mhm.
Because again, if you're listening and you're part of a team, it's pretty easy to take pot shots at the leadership, and again, blame them. I mean, unfortunately for the Green Bay Packers right now, it's like, there's people taking pot shots at people, for teams like under 500. And it's like, man, the whole life is over for them, you
Yeah.
know? And I'm
I,
not a huge football fan, but it's like, man, watching these guys take shots at each other, it's like, this has got to suck,
yeah.
on the day-to-day activities, because eventually it's like, now I'm trying to prove my point. If I say something mean about you or discredit you, now I'm trying to build that case.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
and that's got to just create all kinds of division. And I'm just curious if you see that a lot, or if your clarity, courage, and commitment actually draw the leadership and the team closer together.
The fourth slide on my keynote speech, it says, those on the field get paid, those in the stands pay. Right?
Yep.
So many people are on the stands complaining and judging and making comments
Yep.
without actually playing the leadership game. They're not in the weeds, they're not taking the hits,
Yep.
they're not getting bones cracked. They're being so cowardice sitting on the stands
Yep.
and
Yep.
complaining after complaining. So, that's my take. It's like, if you're going to lead from the field. If
Yeah.
you're going to be a team member, play on the field. Let's go. But
Yep.
don't take pot shots at your team members and at your leader if you're not willing to say that to their face. If
Right.
you're not willing to be like, walk in the office and be like, hey, I disagree with XYZ, but I'm going to get fired. You're already kind of firing yourself because you're not doing what you should be doing for the business to succeed.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
by the way, as a business owner, you're getting a paycheck also. This also goes for you. Just
Yep.
because you're the owner doesn't give you a hall pass to
Yep.
not play on the field.
Yeah. Absolutely. And if you're not gonna play on the field, then don't criticize those people that are, right?
Yeah.
Because you
Yeah.
know,
Great example. Sorry, Dave.
yeah.
Went to go see some clients out in Arizona, and they were complaining about their team, So we sat down for 3 hour lunch, and I brought up like 5 things that were happening between them. Hey, have you made this decision? No. Hey, have you made this change? No.
Yeah.
What do you expect then?
Yeah.
Like, oh, but I'm paying them. Did you get a paycheck this month? Yes. you're also getting paid. Get to work, shut your mouth, and let's rock and roll. You know,
Not making a decision is still a decision.
correct.
And that's where, yeah, I see leaders so often, trying to hide behind that. Well, I haven't decided yet. Well, you know
Yeah,
what? You have.
yeah.
And, so yeah, I love holding the team as accountable as the leader. I think that's really well said. I've been raised prior to, when I was younger, 100 years ago, it was the boss, right? I mean, it was like my first job was making pizzas at Shakey's. I was 15 years old. And like there was a general manager that was the boss, and whatever
Mhm.
he said, you did, and I'm just trying to wonder, when did you see the boss kind of change to leader? Because now leader seems to be the word, boss, managers are kind of like, taking a back seat to that leader, which I think is a positive. But
Mhm.
I'm just curious, when did you notice what really kind of made that switch? Have you had any, insight on that at all?
So I think that bosses boss people around, and leaders coach, train, support their team.
Oh, that's
And
great.
I'm going to say something that, like, I think there's been incredible leaders around. I just think that there's been a lot of talk on LinkedIn about leadership, a lot more,
Mhm.
because there's some really crappy bosses out there. So I went from boss to leader, for example. I like something flipped the switch. Can I start training my team, supporting them? And when we were at like 68 employees, we gave like financial teaching, we gave health coaching. We did so many things that
Sure.
added to the bottom line of the business as well as the bottom line of the team member.
Right.
I think it's always been around. I think that people have been talking about it more and more lately. I think it's taking the wrong turn, which is my fear, Dave. Like, everyone's talking about these external leadership aspects,
Yeah.
right? Everyone's talking about, like, oh, leaders need to serve and leaders need to be empathetic and all that type of stuff. Yes, but leaders also need to make a profit. So let's
Yeah.
talk about, like, how do we make money? How do we lead a team? Let's
Yeah.
rock and roll.
Yep. Wow, that's so cool. We're back to that same spot. Why?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's so hard for my brain, Yigal, to not do black or white. Dude,
Yeah.
it's either one or the other where you just pick. And
Yeah.
that's what my brain keeps telling me. And so I'm guessing there's other people that are stuck in that same spot. And
Yeah.
then if they're if they're people, right, then they're going to choose their team. If they're profit based, then they're going to abandon their team and just focus on the money part. And so
So,
I wish that we could spend more time in the
yeah.
middle. So go
So
ahead.
just really quickly, if they're
Yeah.
profit based, they're going to bring on the right team
Yeah.
to make profit and still lead. That's
Yep.
I get when I started talking about this profit producing leadership stuff, everyone's like, I don't know, Eagle, what about servant leadership? And what do you call it? And I'm like, listen, man, let me ask you two questions. Do you want to make money? Yes. Do you want to be a better leader? Yes. Why can't I put those two things together?
Right.
You
Yep.
know, nobody thought about putting salted caramel on a dessert until a couple of years ago. And then we did it. And it was like, oh, salted caramel ice cream, the best thing on the planet. Like,
Right.
sometimes you don't think about putting two things together and you do, and you're like, oh my God,
Yep.
that's incredible.
Okay.
You
Yeah.
know?
Yep. No, that's, I guess, I don't know. And I don't know if more people than we want to admit are black and white, where it's either
Mhm.
one way or the other. But it's hard when I think about, there's a book called People Over Profit,
Yep.
you know, and it's like, right away, there it is, black or white. It's either people or profit,
Yeah.
and it's a great book. I think the concepts are really solid. I just am trying to understand, it's people and profit, or whatever,
Yeah.
you want to call it. But I just,
Well,
I greatly appreciate your insight on that.
let's just take that title. And I know about that book. What happens if there was no people? There'd be no profit. What
Right,
happens if there was no profit? There'd be no people.
right.
You need each other interchangeably as important as the other.
It's just like you and your brother, right? You needed him in sales, he needed
Yeah.
you in operations. I mean, that's the age-old war in business,
Yeah.
is
Yep.
operations people hate salespeople, salespeople despise the operations
Yeah.
people. But the
And you need
reality
to.
is, you can't have one without the other.
Yeah.
So that's really
100%.
Yep.
100%.
Wow. So I'm just curious, as we land this today, There are people listening that right now, this is really resonating with them, Yigal. And so what I always say to people is rather than jump into your next task, rather than jump onto your next podcast, why don't you sit for a minute with what is just been shared and really let it resonate from inside. And if it's still like yearning to be, if it's a scratch or an itch you can't scratch, reach out to Yigal. So, what would be the best way for people to reach out to you?
Yeah, best way, because my name is not easy to remember or spell. I would go to I would go to my website, Unlock the Leader, which is pretty easy, unlocktheleader.com. And
Okay.
we have leadership assessments there. We have a free download for you, for your listeners. So just go
Awesome.
to unlocktheleader.com, start your journey there, get in contact with me, and then we'll see where we go.
Perfect. Yeah, I saw on your website that you put your calendar on there. So
Mhm.
it's awesome that you're accessible right there. So we'll definitely put that information in the show notes. And hopefully, if you're listening again, rather than just try to pretend that this isn't happening, it's so much easier to just realize that it's not a bad thing to have a coach. And, Tiger Woods, we talk about him and Michael Jordan all the time on this show. Those two guys have probably more coaches than anybody. But you know what? I could look at Tiger Woods swing, Yigal, and I couldn't tell if it was right, wrong, good, or bad. That swing coach looks and he knows exactly what's going on. Why do we go through life thinking we know everything? It blows me away. And
Yeah.
and so that's why I hope that today people will, at least connect with you and see if there's an opportunity for you to help them, because we do all have blind spots. And I think, again, Tiger or Michael, either one would admit they have blind spots, and that's why they have a coach. So I appreciate your time today and hanging out with us and just talking about clarity and courage and commitment. I'm going to look at those words differently now because of what you shared. So I greatly appreciate your time and all that you're doing for us.
My pleasure, honored to be here. And I think that you said it the best. Like, listen to this podcast and take action. Like, just sit with yourself and ask, what's not working in my life right now? And what can I do to change that?
Yeah. And I can tell you just one last thing. When you say, tell me what's not working in your life or think about that, my immediate reaction is everything's fine.
Yeah.
Right. I'm good. And that's why it takes a little bit of, there's the comfort zone and then there's the fear zone. And that's in between, the comfort zone, fear zone, growth zone. So if you want to grow, you got to work through that fear zone. And that's
Yeah.
where it's like, man, jump on the guy's calendar. He's going to help you. Um, you know,
100%.
talk to somebody, do something, my dad always said, don't just stand there, do something. So
Yeah.
I'm going to share that as we close it today. Don't just stand there, do something. And a great do something is to reach out to Yigal and learn more from him. And again, thanks so much for hanging out with us.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.